Welcome back to Fashion here. It's time for my power rankings for the 2025 Hungarian Grand Prix. So starting right away with number 20, it is going to be Alpine driver Pierre Gasly. So for Gasly qualifying, not so good. Qualifies P17, out qualified by his young rookie teammate Franco Colapinto by 900ths of a second. Furthermore, race not fantastic. Was on the better strategy, the one-stop strategy. So again, that's kind of part of the reason why he did initially finish ahead of his teammate on the road, but also kind of a bit of a sloppy collision with Carlos Sainz, picked up a 10-second penalty, which dropped him to dead last in the race in 19th place. All right, number 19 is fellow Frenchman Esteban Ocon. So for Ocon, I believe qualified 18th. I want to say started the race 17th, I think, with Tsunoda's grid count, with Tsunoda opting to start from the pit lane. Out qualified by his rookie teammate, not Esteban Ocon. Oliver Behrman, of course, Ocon can't out qualify himself. But yes, out qualified by Behrman by 2.7 tenths of a second. So a pretty big gap there in qualifying. Especially a bit worrying since that this is a track that historically Ocon has been very good at. Race very anonymous, jumped in the pit stops by Alex Albon is really the only thing I remember from his race, and he ended up finishing P16. 18th is Nico Hulkenberg, so qualified 19th, I believe. Yeah, qualified 19th, out qualified by his rookie teammate Bortoleto by 4.95 tenths of a second. Decent strategy in the race, pitted very, very early for the first of his two stops, and that allowed him to kind of make his way up the order a little bit and ends up finishing P13 on the road. Otherwise, a pretty quiet race. Had a little bit of a skirmish with Tsunoda as well. I think got a bit forced wide there by the Japanese driver, but otherwise very quiet race for him. And I think really you can kind of tell for the first three drivers on my power ranking for this week that all three of them veteran drivers who were kind of soundly outperformed by the, much less experienced teammates. Okay, number 17 is Lewis Hamilton. Very tough weekend for Hamilton. So qualifies P12 and qualifies 2.45 tenths off of his teammate Leclerc. Now, Leclerc, of course, would go on to qualify on pole. And that, of course, I think makes the qualifying difference look a little bit worse. The Ferraris honestly didn't look that great through Q1, Q2. It was really looking like it was just going to be McLaren's all the way until the end of qualifying. But of course, Leclerc with that shock pole position, I think makes qualifying look a little bit worse than it actually was, which is why I have Hamilton not, dead last in 20th. And for the race, very, very quiet race, didn't really do a whole lot. Again, a bit similar to Ocon. Only real one notable moment from Hamilton's race was when he was basically scared off track, like I said in my review yesterday, by Max Verstappen. So finishes 12th. Pretty lonely race. Definitely a driver who definitely needed the summer break period. Now, number 16 is not Yuki Tsunoda. That's Oliver Behrman. Yes, bit of a spoiler there, but yes, number 16 is Oliver Behrman. Sorry, I had to mix up my notes quite a bit because of some extra details that came out after I made my initial copy. But yeah, number 16 is Oliver Behrman. That was official. Qualified 11th, so qualifying very, very good. Out qualified Ocon by 2.7 tenths of a second. In the race, retired with a mechanical retirement. So initially, I actually had Behrman 9th on my power rankings, but basically it came out after that. During the race, Behrman was basically going over one of the curbs. I believe it was the curb at turn 12, very, very aggressively, picking up too much gravel, and he apparently gave himself gravel rash is what they call it. It's basically you damage the gravel, basically comes up and it damages the under tray, the floor of the car. And so basically the team had warned him about this, told him not to do it, kept doing it, did it in the race, and eventually caused not too much damage to his car, so he was forced to retire. So obviously that completely changes the complexion of the race. If it was just a random mechanical DNF, probably ends up top 10. Weekend ends up looking a lot better than it actually is. But unfortunately for Behrman, a bit of a costly error and could have definitely potentially cost him a point or two in the Grand Prix. Now, for number 15 is indeed Yuki Tsunoda. So for Tsunoda, qualifies 16th, which again, in Red Bull, not great usually. But this weekend, he only was out qualified by Max Verstappen by 1.6 tenths of a second. So qualifying margin, the best it's been all season. Honestly, very, very good around a track where Verstappen has historically done very, very well in qualifying. I think his against his teammates historically, he's meeting qualifying gaps like over half a second. So the fact that, Tsunoda basically ran him within a tenth and a half is very impressive and very good. So again, not going to penalize him too much for that. Race pretty anonymous, just comes home to 17th place, which again, looking at those stats for Red Bull, normally that would mean like bottom 2 or 3 guaranteed. But because of the circumstance, because Red Bull had such a poor weekend, I am moving up a little bit higher, so he is 15th for this weekend. Number 14 is Alex Albon. So Albon qualified dead last in 20th, out-qualified by his teammate by 5.7 tenths of a second. So not a great qualifying session for Albon. I guess the only kind of small blessing in disguise, I guess, for him is that the Williams had a really wretched weekend. They were probably the I want to say ninth fastest car this weekend, probably only faster than the Alpines. So again, for an Albon to have a weekend that he was underperforming, for it to be a track where Williams was not particularly strong, was I guess maybe a bit of a bright spot there. As he again didn't, even if he had performed really well, probably doesn't get any points anyway. Again, was not definitely the second best of the two Williams drivers this weekend, but again, given Williams's relatively poor performance this weekend, I thought, it's not the worst performance in the world for Albon. And he did gain a position in a couple positions through the race and ends up finishing 15th. Now, number 13 is Franco Colapinto, qualified 14th, out-qualified his teammate Pierre Gasly by 9/100 of a second, I should say. Race was not so good in some parts, and a lot of it not his fault. Some of it was his fault. A poor first lap, dropped from 4th on the grid to 18th. So basically, that entire qualifying that basically placement gap that he had to his teammate Gasly, basically completely eroded right there on that first lap, losing four positions there. Afterwards, 2 pit stops were very, very slow. I think one of them was like 12 seconds, another was 7 seconds. Just way too much time lost in the pit stops. Not his fault. I'm assuming it's not his fault because, of course, if you pit and you miss your marks completely, that's obviously going to add a lot of time to your pit stop. But it doesn't seem like that was the case. It was just really, really bad stops on Alpine's end. Also on the inferior strategy, the 2-stopper, and then again, even with that, only finished, I think, 5 or 6 seconds behind his teammate Gasly. But of course, with Gasly's penalty, ends up finishing ahead of him on the road there. So again, a more positive weekend for Colapinto, but the Alpine's been a handful. Very, very poor car. So even on weekends where like he's performing relatively well over one lap like this weekend, the best he can do with it is only a Q2 appearance. All right, number 12 is Kimi Antonelli. Kimi Antonelli, I should say. Yeah, I don't know what's wrong with me today, but yeah, Kimi Antonelli qualified P17, out-qualified by his teammate George Russell by a pretty large margin, about 1.2 tenths of a second. But again, that was exacerbated by the fact that Antonelli's lap was deleted at the end of Q2, so it basically was his first of the 2 laps. So again, with track evolution, of course, it was going to be quite a bit slower. But good strategy in the race. Did the initial early stop for the 2-stopper, but extended that second stint really, really long. I think he was the only driver to really pull that off. And again, came away with a point. So good job there by Antonelli in 10th. All right, number 11 is Isaac Hadjar. So qualifies 10th, out-qualified by his teammate Lawson by 900 of a second. I think Hadjar will be kicking himself a bit. He looked like he could have qualified top 5 or so all through the practice sessions, but I think with the conditions at the end of Q3, I think a little bit trickier for the Racing Bulls perhaps. And also he had, a 3 to 2.5 tenth gap on Lawson pretty much all through practice and the first 2 qualifying sessions. But when they both got to Q3, Lawson was the one who got the better of the 2 laps in. So again, I do think Hadjar will be a little bit frustrated with that. Poor opening lap for Hadjar, loses a position and then never really able to recover from there. Finished the race in P11. But still, I don't think, not a terrible weekend for Hadjar. I still think, he had a pretty decent weekend. Now, number 10 is Carlos Sainz. Now, for Sainz, qualified P13, out-qualified his teammate Albon by about 5.7 tenths, like I mentioned before. In the race, not really able to do a lot because, again, overtaking pretty difficult around this track, although we did see some good overtakes here and there, mostly courtesy of Max Verstappen. It made it very, very difficult, like if you started at the back to make your way forward. And in addition, this was a track that I think Williams was not very well suited to. So again, even if Sainz had a really good weekend, wasn't really able to come away with any points to show for it. So again, I think 10th is about a reasonable spot for him. Number 9 is Lance Stroll. So pretty good weekend by Stroll. Qualified sixth, only out qualified by his teammate Alonso by 17 thousandths of a second. Loses position on the opening lap to Bortoleto, but pretty solid race pace, pretty quiet race. Comes home to P7, really solid handful of 6 points for Stroll. Number 8 is Liam Lawson. So for Lawson, qualifies ninth, out qualified Hadger, like I mentioned before. In the race, really strong pace, finishes P8. Basically pulls, ends up, fending off Max Verstappen, pulling away from Verstappen in the closing stages. Qualifying, I think, was okay. Maybe a little bit more room for improvement there, but I honestly thought the race execution was really good. So I think 8 for me for Lawson. Now, number 7 is your race winner, Lando Norris, which is a bit of a surprise as your race winner down in 7th, but I do think it's fair. So qualifies 3rd. Definitely, car should have been on pole position with the pace that the McLaren's had. I know the temperatures dropped. I know the wind direction changed as well, but it doesn't take away from the fact that operationally this was still the best car by I think a pretty decent margin, and the car should have been on pole. So the fact that 1, he doesn't get pole, and 2, he's out qualified by his teammate, Piastri by about a small margin, but still out qualified by 15 thousandths of a second. Again, qualifying not great there. Opening lap in the race, not great. Loses 2 positions, loses a position to Russell, loses a position to Alonso as well, and that kind of puts him on the back foot for the rest of the race. And that kind of gives them the opportunity to opt for that one-stop strategy, the kind of higher reward, low risk kind of strategy. In that if it goes wrong, he still maybe finishes 4th on the road, but if it works out, as we saw in the race, he ends up winning the race, and that's exactly what we got. So I think even if the race was a little bit lucky, I think Norris still did a really good job managing the stints. Managing the tires to make sure he still had the pace to be able to execute that strategy well. But, just, a bit of an underperformance in qualifying, plus a pretty scrappy opening lap means that I do drop him a little bit down. And kind of combined with the fact I think he did get a little bit lucky with his strategy kind of working out a bit unexpectedly. So, number 6 is Max Verstappen. So for Verstappen, a lot of what I said about Tsunoda qualifies for Verstappen as well. Qualifying P8 and finishing P9 in a Red Bull would ordinarily be a pretty bad result. But I think given, Max Verstappen's general track record, I think we can kind of get the benefit of the doubt and say, this wasn't Verstappen underperforming. This was simply the car being an absolute disaster. This was probably the 6th, 7th best car this weekend. So for him to qualify in Q3 and, get points as well, I think is, basically definitely exceeds expectations of what you would normally expect a car in that position to do. So for Verstappen, again, qualifying not great. Qualifying P8, but again, I think that was about where the car was capable of. It qualifies, Tsunoda by 1.6 tenths. And again, you can get in these dumb chicken and egg arguments of was it Tsunoda performing or was it Verstappen underperforming? And again, it's these kind of circular arguments about, is it this chicken or egg type arguments are there obviously, but I'm not really going to bother getting into them. In the race, I thought had a bit of a scruffy first lap, lost a position I believe to Lawson, but really good decisive overtakes Lawson, overtakes Stroll, kind of gets stuck behind Alonso and Bortoleto, and then pits pretty early for that first pit stop, and then overtakes about 5 or 6 other cars including Hamilton, pits again, and then repeats as well after that. So again, I think it was a really fighting drive from Verstappen. I think pretty good race from him. Really got the most out of the car. Just really unfortunate for him that the car was so terrible this weekend. All right, number 5 is George Russell. Really quiet, solid weekend for Russell. Qualifies P4. A really big margin over Antonelli in qualifying, like I mentioned before, about 1.1 second. In the race, finishes P3. Looked on pace for P4 for most of the Grand Prix, but honestly thought he just had really solid pace all throughout, and did a really good job of attacking Leclerc. Did a really good job of overtaking him cleanly when Leclerc had a bit of a couple moments there, copped himself a penalty. But for Russell, I thought did a really good job and really maximized the result of the car, because I think really no one was going to get the 2 McLarens in this race. Now, number 4 is Oscar Piastri. So for Piastri, again, some of what I said about Norris applies to him. Probably should have been on pole position, so that definitely holds him back. And again, was a little bit on the edge with the kind of some of the moves, like the penultimate lap move where he locked up again. I'm not really holding that against him, but I did feel like, you know, Piastri was perhaps leading a little bit on the table there, in terms of overall weekend performance. You know, if he had executed this weekend perfectly, he probably wins this Grand Prix. But I think still pretty good weekend by Piastri, and was, I think, overall on balance better than his teammate Norris. All right, number 3 is Fernando Alonso. So for Alonso, really good weekend. Qualifies P5, and then in the race finishes P5. Now, I guess one thing that you could hold against Alonso is that the fact that his teammate Stroll also had a really good weekend showed that the car was performing very, very well. And, you know, if Stroll's able to qualify P6, if he's able to finish the race P7, and, you know, Stroll's not the greatest driver, you know, definitely below average driver. The fact that if Stroll's able to do that, you know, of course, it should be expected that a driver of Alonso's caliber should be able to do, you know, quite a bit better than that. So I do think there's a fair argument there about that. But nonetheless, I think not taking away anything from Alonso's weekend, thought really good job, maximized points haul for the team, and was basically best of the rest behind the front running teams. All right, number 2 is Charles Leclerc. So for Leclerc, gets that shock pole position, really excellent job there, phenomenal result. Like I said, out-qualified his teammate Hamilton by about 2.5 tenths of a second. In the Grand Prix, of course, the opening stint of the race was very, very impressive. Basically was even pulling a gap on Piastri. And then kind of the middle stint and the third stint is where things started to fall off. Of course, I already kind of talked about this before with my theory about the tire pressures. And again, that's not really Leclerc's fault. That's something on the team side. So I think from that side, I think the only thing that I can really take away from Leclerc's race is that he was a little bit too aggressive, a little bit too erratic in his defense of Russell for that final spot on the podium. So that is why he is not part of the reason why he's not number 1 on the power rankings this week. But still, really good job by Leclerc. Just a bit unfortunate that he was not able to get a podium this weekend. So, of course, number 1 is Gabriel Bortoleto. Qualifies P7 in a Sauber, out-qualifies his teammate by half a second. His teammate has an excellent record around this track, so again, the fact that he's able to do that, also very, very impressive. In the race, a good start, gets a position off of Stroll, and then does a really good job of basically sticking with the Alonso's Aston, which I think was the faster of the two cars, like kind of what I mentioned before with both Astons being able to be so high up. And again, I thought overall very, very solid race by Bortoleto P6 to get his best result in Formula 1. I think if this was a race where one of the front runners, the race winner, had like a much cleaner weekend, like if someone had gotten pole, led, lights the flag, Bortoleto probably doesn't end up number 1 on my power rankings, but I think just with the circumstances of this weekend, it allows a driver like Bortoleto, who I think a very clean, very strong weekend in the midfield, to be number 1 on my power rankings. So there you go. That's my power rankings for 2025 Hungarian Grand Prix. And that is it until the end of summer break, which is in 4 weeks' time. Now, of course, I'll still be producing content, making videos. I have a lot of historical analysis videos planned for the next 4 weeks, looking at kind of drivers from this past quarter century. A couple other fun things as well, like for example, what drivers had the best car throughout their careers. That's definitely a spicy topic that I'm planning to do. I'm not sure if I'm going to be doing team reviews for mid-season. I've done those last 2 years, and sometimes the review counts are kind of hit and miss. But again, we'll see how I feel and how my workload is through the summer months. But again, thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.